Fine, thank you, sir. Okay. Panel. The world that we support is not an ideal one. The world, but in a crucial reality where 80% of CEOs are still men, we support a world where it is realistic, where we can actually lift people that are women out of poverty. Two arguments I'll support. Firstly, where we get more opt-in on side proposition. Secondly, even if you get less opt-in, or you get more gender equality on a principle level. But before that, two pieces of crucial framing. Firstly, what does promoting this solidarity actually look like on their side of the house? It literally looks like trying to unify women as much as possible to fulfill their aim of actually getting collective bargaining aid. Therefore, what feminist movements will do is to, for example, literally water down policies so that you can get as many women to opt in as possible on their side of the house, or actively undermining agenda of other social movements. But secondly, what does maximizing individual empowerment on our side look like? It looks like we supporting different social movements, advocating for different ways for different individual holistic policies to empower female. So this looks like social movements advocating for education or social movement advocating for female promotion in corporations. Given that, let's talk about our first argument on less opt-in. The first question under this is why you lose support from men on their side of the house. There are three mechanisms. Firstly, I want to note that this feminist movement probably polarizes women on their side of the house. The reason for that is because in the process of appealing toward the entirety of the women, it is likely that you lose the us versus them narrative. The reason for that is because female literally faces similar struggles, and the struggles literally stem from the men-centric society. Therefore, the most likely and the most effective way to gain more support is presumably through things like actively antagonizing men, because this is what the movement is for. But secondly, on the level of perception, when you see a group, you're now likely to be seen as an extremist group. This is because the net probability towards things like radicalism increases on their side of the house, insofar as the number of interaction and discussion decreases between men and women on their side of the house. But lastly, I want to note that this creates justification for men to further discriminate women on their side of the house for two reasons. First, in a world with polarization of things like women versus men narrative, it is really easier for you as men to actively join in the conflict and harm women in. But secondly, they can literally say that this is a form of self-defense, right? Because in a world where women is actively opposing against men, it is likely that men can also use the same narrative to say that women is bad, for instance, so that you can actively justify it. So thank you. So the conclusion here is simple. You get less opt-in from men, but it is more likely that the men is going to actively hurt women on their side of the house. But second thing I want to point out is that you are also going to lose support from men, or women on their side of the house. There are two reasons for this. Firstly, you're going to be seen as a member of an extreme group. Women fear that they're also going to be seen as a part of that movement, and notice here that this is really, really probable insofar as your workplace literally involves those kind of men in the first place, right? But secondly, it literally contradicts with other goals of women. Because literally, when we talk about feminist movement, we mustn't frame it as a monolith. We think that there's a spectrum of feminist movement in different places for different goals. And when you want these kind of umbrella goal of things like actively unifying women, it is likely that we will cause active conflict or no cooperation with other groups insofar as resources are zero-sum and you're less likely to have cooperation on their side of the house. There are two reasons why it is comparatively better on our side. Firstly, I think the things that we're advocating for are more clear. When the impact of joining a social movement is to water down, to appeal as many women as possible, you're much more likely to have to set a goal on a more unclear basis so that you can actually reach a consensus. But secondly, I think the goals that we're advocating for are much more proximate. Yeah. The reason for that is because the importance of joining a feminist movement will likely not be proximate to the vast majority of individuals, because you're advocating for better for society as a whole, better for women as a whole, rather than individualistic growth or individualistic empowerment. Before I move on to the importance, sure, I'll take that point.
empowerment, even if it is individually, oftentimes means standing up against men in your own household, which makes them antagonistic as well. Why is this not a contradiction?
Wait, I really don't understand that, because literally what we're saying is that you're literally going to use a capitalistic society and you're literally like go up and climb up the social ladder, right? We're not like actively opposing against men. We can literally like co-opt benefits on our side of the house. Whereas in your side, you're seeing that no, what men is not good because literally you're trying to like unify as women. What is the importance of this? Firstly, I want to note that losing support from men is extremely bad. The reason for that is because people that are at the top of the corporate ladder tends to be men for 3 reasons. Firstly, historically, I think it is the case that there's an entrenched gender inequality. And it has always been the case that kings have been always more important than queen, and it has always been the case that women has not been able to join politics, for instance. But secondly, insofar as there's a lot of men at the top, there's proximity bias. The men are more likely to choose people from men because they're from the same community. This is a subconscious bias. But thirdly, statistically, 80% of CEOs are still men. 71% of the people who work in parliament are still men. It is likely that the people that are working at the top of the corporate ladder are still men. But even if this is not true, I want to note that discrimination oftentimes comes from men. So what this means conversely is that if you don't change the attitude from men, it is really a meaningless thing to do. But the second thing I want to point out is why losing opt-in from women is bad. The reason why this is bad is really intuitive, right? As women, you get less political power, and what this means is that you have less policy change on their side of the house. But thirdly, our claim that those kind of social movements will become extreme in itself is debate winning. The reason for that is because there's a lot of people who are outside of the movement. Those kind of individuals on their side of the house are much less likely to not want to get involved in those kind of policies because they're also going to be seen as extreme, right? The reason why this is likely is because you're more likely to prioritize your proximate interests rather than joining these kind of social movements. Like for instance, I think if you join this kind of social movement, if it was the case that you're going to lose jobs, you're less likely to actually support for these kind of policies in the first place. That is why on net you lose support on their side of the house. Second argument, even if we get less opt-in or we achieve gender equality. The first thing I want to point out under this is that you get more role models on our side of the house. The reason why this is unachievable on their side is that given that you put emphasis on the overall progression of women, you get more resources on overall rather than putting it into one individualistic growth. What this means is that you get less women that is likely to be super good in one single field. You get more, maybe in their best case scenario, even if you get overall achievement as a society, you're less likely to get role models that is likely to trickle down on our side of the house. But secondly, I want to note that we achieve economic independence. When females are economically dependent on males, this creates power asymmetry. Therefore, the probability of success in gender equality increases when you literally strive for economic independence. The reason why this is a comparative thing is that we've been telling you throughout the bench that you do things like educational policies, you do things like empowerment programs, right? Therefore, on the level of individuality, we actually get women that are not dependent on on those kind of structures. The reason why gender equality is important is pretty simple. This is because note that gender it is inherently arbitrary that you are born in one single gender. So I think this debate literally functions in a way that gender equality is the end impact for each side of the house. But even if we lose on opt-in, we get more impact. That is why we're so proud to propose.
Speakers spoke for 8.
If I speak at this volume, will I be audible? Right. I'll be honest at the start of my speech. During prep, we struggled because we didn't know what solidarity actually looks like. And that is because solidarity throughout history has never been achieved within the feminist movement. That is because there is no role models who promote solidarity. There is no past successful precedents that actually promote solidarity in the first place. That is why we said, in order for you to achieve solidarity, because women do not have the same lived-in experiences as every other woman, you actually have to look at the root cause of that experience, which is disenfranchisement by men. That is why you're going to have anti-men rhetoric on their side of the house, which causes massive polarization. I'm going to talk about two things in this speech. Firstly, which side is easier to achieve, individual empowerment or solidarity? And secondly, even if the probability of achieving your agenda is the same, why our outcome is way better. Firstly, I'm going to clarify the strategic burden that opposition handles today. Because no panel, that all of their case is predicated on solidarity actually happening. But let's actually look at the motion again. The motion asks whether promoting solidarity is good or not. They never get to assume whether solidarity happens or not. Therefore, they cannot actually achieve the collectivization that all of their case is hinged on. What was our comparative here? We said our comparative was something like the extension of the status quo, right? Which is, empirically speaking, different feminist movements have different agendas. So some feminist movements may cater towards fixing the mindsets of men. Some feminist movements may cater towards women who are abused. Some feminist movements might cater to women in the capitalistic structure. We think those are all okay on our side, and we think those are much more likely to be achievable insofar as they have specific policies that actually resonate with lived-in experiences of women on the ground. First catch then, which is easier to achieve, individuals versus solidarity? We told you that solidarity was unlikely from the outset. This is because the net number of individuals you have to convince is just way too massive on their side of the house. We told you that individuals have different individual issues, and there are different issues that are much more proximate to them. Therefore, it's unlikely that solidarity is going to happen in a way that is positive. Crucially, and here's the nuance I want to add here, solidarity of women is something you have to go ahead and show every time any other woman has an issue. That is because in order for the feminist movement to showcase solidarity, even if it's not an issue that's happening to you, if the other woman is experiencing that issue, you have to show solidarity and you have to speak up. On our side, you only have to speak up and you only have to show up insofar as that issue impacts you. So therefore, if the feminist movement on our side has a program that educates women, all you have to do as a woman is to opt into that educational system. We think that's a lower barrier of entry for women on our side of the house. Therefore, even if you convince people that solidarity is objectively good, you have to feel so attached to that solidarity as an objective concept that you go ahead every time and you ignore all other things like financial constraints to go to protect every single time a woman as an individual is oppressed. Why is probability of success important? Two things here. One, resources are inherently zero-sum. You cannot get back the resources that you're spending on this promotion. This is like very big things like promotion, right? You have to hold social media campaigns that get people to protest. But secondly, aligning with what you support is very, very important. This is because, as a feminist movement on their side of the house, you are saying solidarity is important, but the woman in your movement is not showcasing solidarity. That means you as a feminist movement looks incredibly ineffective. That is at the point in which men can say, that movement is very ineffective. What they're trying to achieve is actively polarizing us, and it's not even effective for women as well. What is the strategic implication of this wing? On both sides, we push for individual empowerment, or we push for solidarity in order to get gender equality. So even if this end impact is symmetric, which we clearly show you was not, getting the resources right now and getting that success and getting that agenda right now is much more important because there are still women on the ground who are struggling. Therefore, we think the probability of success should be weighed above any other clash within this debate. Second clash then, even if probability of achieving that agenda is similar, why on their side they get toxic outcomes? I want to talk about two things there. A, on the process of achieving that agenda, and B, after achieving that agenda. First thing then, on the process of achieving that agenda, we told you that it was likely that you antagonize men on their side because that is the only collective thing that women have in common when they face these problems. They tried to POIs, right? They said, how is that antagonizing men? How do we not antagonize men on our side? I'm going to answer that. No. We might antagonize men in some cases, but this is about narratives that the social, feminist movement as a whole is pushing. Because in order for you to have solidarity, the only narrative you can put opt into is hating men. But on our side, sure, in feminist movements that might help women who are abused, might have antagonistic sentiments towards men, but I think in other cases, they actually show cooperation towards them because they understand that that is the actor that they need to convince in order for you to actually get opt-in. I'm going to talk about the second thing on you after achieving your agenda. Before that, I'll take a POI if there is one.
Are you willing to water down your policies just to get more opt-in from men?
we're not saying that we're going to water down policies. Rather, on our side, our policy is going to look much more specific because it's on your side of the house that you antagonize them. On our side, there's individual policies that by individual feminist groups actively being promoted. Second thing then, on after achieving your agenda, we told you role models go down because these role models are people who are already successful, right? They don't need solidarity because they're already successful. They don't have issues that they need other women grouping together in order to fight for them. Why then is role models incredibly important? Two things. Firstly, because sexism is unconscious. We have explicit policy already in the status quo. Obviously, you cannot claim that there is just explicit legislative oppression towards women. Rather, the problem right now is you have to change the sexist mindset of men on the ground. Therefore, in order for you to actually do this, you have to increase the exposure men have to women who are as successful, and you have to show them that these people can be just as successful. Therefore, in order for you to actually address the problem that exists within the status quo, you have to change, you have to increase the number of role models. But secondly, independent of what men feel, right? Because don't let team opposition get away with saying that our case is only about men. No. If there is role models, even if men do not opt in, it's likely that women opt in. And this fixes things like internalized sexism. Because when women see other women being successful, they actively feel and they actively exposed to other women who are successful. They have past precedents in which they can look into and they're able to similarly imitate. Notice that this is likely to be more probable on the our side because each individual feminist group has each individual role model. Therefore, it's likely that there's a role model who have proximate incentives to you, which you can actually look towards. Therefore, it's likely that women on our side is going to do small-scale upscales, for example, choosing education over getting married immediately. They try to claim that gender equality will happen on their side because women is going to come together. They gave us the example of Me Too. I think this is a terrible example. Number one, Me Too achieved no legislative change because it was only privileged women in Hollywood calling these men out. The structural reasoning for this is that most people are not from Hollywood. Most people are not Emma Watson. This is why you actually need opt-in from men in order for you to get the mass media attention and in order for you to actually get the structural change in the first place. Secondly, I would rather flip this, right? Because when there's solidarity, there's pressure for you to support women irregardless of what you do. There's two implications of this. A, women within the feminist movement is now actively oppressed. Because look at the way in which there's feminists on the ground right now who thinks trans women aren't women. What happens to those women? It's actually likely that because this is the overriding metric, these women are going to be oppressed. But B, there's more men who are going to be accused of things like abuse without actual accountability. For these reasons, very proud to propose.
The speakers for 8 minutes and 2 seconds.
If I speak at this tone. The reason why they fall out of this debate is because of how unnuanced their arguments are. Basically, all of their arguments rest on two assertions. Firstly, that they'll have this community for women to begin with that support each other endlessly, but secondly, that this community would work in a way that actually advances the motives that each individual within that society feels. Basically, they never mechanistically prove why two of these assertions actually are mechanized. Therefore, insofar as we prove to, analytically, why these are likely to polarize more females and more males on the ground, leading to less net change happening, we win on this regard. With that said, I'm going to prove two things in my speech. Firstly, that the probability of social movement succeeding on their side of the house is extremely slim as compared to our side of the house. And secondly, even if we bite the bullet and say that chances of feminist movement succeeding on our side is slim, we're going to prove to you why we actually get the change that they want and engage with all of our analysis on why individuality actually leads to network change for society. So with that, I'm going to start off with the first argument of the first bash. So the probability of social movement succeeding is slim. And this is basically where I'm going to engage with both their first and second argument. Because basically, all 8 of the mechanisms or assertions that they offer for both of their arguments is essentially premised on this assertion that there's this divide between women and men, between women in the status quo, and on their side, these women are going to be unified under this community. And basically, the strategic mistake that I want to re-flag, that I already flagged in my introduction, is they never mechanistically proved why aiming for solidarity as a movement automatically means opt-in, right? So therefore, insofar as I'm able to analytically disprove this point, all of their arguments that are premised are likely to fall. With that said, there's 2 ways in which I'm going to disprove this premise. Firstly, opt-in from females are far less likely to happen on their side of the house when watered-down policies happen to fulfill as many female incentives as possible. We told you, mechanistically, that the reason why watered-down policy happens is because you want to fulfill as many female interests as possible, right? They never engage in that. Therefore, I think it's safe to assume that they concede to this argument. With that, that was crucial in this debate. This is because the incentive for you to opt into a movement only exists when proximate interests of yourself are met. This is because opting into a social movement comes at the zero-sum cost of your other proximate interests. This is, for example, spending time with your son, spending time with your friends and family. All of these proximate interests comes at the zero-sum cost when you actively participate in things like strikes for these social movements. And our side, as we mechanistically proved to you, fulfills the interests of these individualized women more. And their side actually concedes this in 01. They agree that different movements will work towards fulfilling individualistic interests on our side of the house. Therefore, we think that we weigh over them in terms of opt-in. They have to show mechanistically why that's not true, but I think whipped from their side is just way too late. But secondly, the issue with their side essentially is that they never prove what their counterfactual looks like, and Reno tries to push that, right? And then their O2 tries to respond by saying that patriarchy is going to be a common umbrella. Now here's what moves us on to my second part when I talk about opt-in, which is opt-in for men. Because essentially, when you unite under the same umbrella that of patriarchy, what likely happens is you want to antagonize the reason why that patriarchy happened, which is essentially male. And the way in which they try to engage with our argument comes on like 3 or 4 folds. I'm getting engaged every single one of those. Firstly, their initial response is to say that we shouldn't cater to men because they'll never actually vote for female policies. And the couple of reasons they give as to why this is the case is because men have active incentive to stop females getting in power insofar as they want to remain in power. But actually, I don't think that's how reality works. Most men in the status quo are neutral because they're not powerful businessmen that are actively harmed if females take over their position. If I'm an average worker in an average corporation, it's very likely that even if one female succeeds and becomes the boss, I'm not likely to get any practical harms. Therefore, it's very unlikely that their response applies to the most amount of male that are the most amount of target of males that we talked about in this debate. But then secondly, they say watered down policies would happen. And basically the one-liner they give as to why this is true is because men want to benefit for themselves. 2 responses. A, female rising corporation is a social benefit for all stakeholders, therefore this contributes to male benefits as well. But B, getting jobs for example, their female daughters and stuff, that's likely to be an interest for them too. Therefore, it's very likely that they support feminism, and that's likely to get them utilitarian benefits as well. But then 3, they just put the focus away from their safety. I'll take it in a second. They put the focus away from safety of women is what they argue from their second speaker. But basically, why can't men and safety coexist, right? Insofar as men that support women in the feminist movement, it's very likely that all of your problems are likely to be agreed on, and all of your problems are likely to be respected. Therefore, a safe space can coexist with male existence. I think the unnuance in their argument loses them out of this debate. Before I move on to the second, sure.
Like, if most men are part of the feminist movement anyway by virtue of their daughters and stuff, what change exists under your side?
Okay, so the reason why change exists is because you actively antagonize male at the point in which you concede that you want to have the basic umbrella of patriarchy, and you want to cast it upon all women as the common objective that you want to oppose. Therefore, we think that there's net less of those antagonization happening insofar as you push for less antagonization, but more towards females progressing in things like companies. With that, I'm going to move on to the second clash. Even if the chances of individual feminist movements succeeding is extremely slim, we told you that the process of working towards that success produces net more utile outcomes for feminist movement in general. And we think that this is far more important in the ground that they never engaged to. This is because now we proved to you that feminist movement's incentive as in general is going to be fulfilled on our side of the house instead of just 1 or 2 social movements succeeding with this model that they implement. With that said, why is feminist agendas unlikely to be served on their side of the house? This is because we told you that feminist cooperation becomes less likely on their side of the house. When you try to get as many females to opt into your movement as possible, in contingent on whether watered down policies happen or not, they'll try to undermine the other problems of other feminist institutions so you can collectivize more power onto your nation. Therefore, this is the reason why you're likely to undermine other feminist movements, other incentives, and therefore even if you succeed as one movement, you're likely to undermine the whole movement of feminism in general. They give no engagement to this, but this is crucial because now we tell you that the macro impact that exists for the whole feminist movement is likely to be undermined on their side of the house. But we also told you furthermore, even if that doesn't fly, that the feminist agendas are likely to be fulfilled on our side of the house. This is because the net probability of women rising in powerful position becomes far more likely on our side of the house. So this is to say, even if in 90% of instances all of our policies fail, all of our policies on things like getting education to women, getting empowerment programs to women fail, in the 10% of those minor instances in which this actually worked and manifests in, for example, women getting into powerful corporate positions or women becoming prime ministers and such, this is rounding. And here's where I engage to what they want us to engage with, which is to say individuality is important for feminism. This is because, let's compare impacts. We actually come prior to the impacts, because even if you want to change with collective bargaining power, you're never going to actually be able to change insofar as you don't have people in power that respect female rights. Therefore, insofar as we implement more female in powerful positions, we're far more likely to get societal change that they want from their side of the house. Finally, because I have more time, I would just want to weigh on why opting in from men was an extremely important issue. This is because of two things. First, we already POI'd from Naki, but men are literally the 50% of voting power in the status quo, so insofar as they oppose the females and are radicalized from female movements, it's very unlikely that female policies would pass from majoritarian vote. But second, it's no lie that institutions that need the most amount of change in terms of feminist movement are men predominantly filled institutions. For example, things like governments, things like corporations and economic industries. Therefore, we think that this impact was rounding as well. For all of those reasons, vote Japan.
Speakers spoke for 8 minutes and 4 seconds.
If I speak at this volume, will I be audible? Great. On one hand, they claim that women are so vulnerable that they literally do not have jobs. But on the other hand, they say women are kind enough and they have the mental capacity to actually care about others. It was very unclear what the actual stance was at the end of this debate. Two things in the speech. First, more solidarity happened. Second, even if both agendas are equally achieved, which outcome is better? Before that, let me clarify the comparative. On their side, they support solidarity. On our side, we told you that individual groups all actively promote individual things, right? We're not saying that all these groups are going to be all catered towards men. The difference then is, on our side, groups are simply just not going to antagonize. We're not saying that they're actively going to cater towards men. We gave this comparative from first. It was likely because it was the extension of the status quo, there was literally no engagement. First clash then, more solidarity happened. Notice the strategic implication of this clash. Because they asserted solidarity would happen, and they hinged their entire case on this. The only example that they give was #MeToo. A, this only applies to Hollywood, therefore this is not solidarity, but B, this is literally our side, right? Because we're telling you that insofar as Amber Heard falsely accused Johnny Depp of abuse, that is when polarization from men actually happened. What was our mechanism here? One, we told you that women will not opt in because of watered down policy and they have more proximate incentives. Secondly, men who originally opt in. And the case is, 90% of men are not CEOs. Most likely that men actually support the feminist movement if it doesn't come at the net harm of them. Therefore, the difference is, even if there is a positive change on our side, at least we don't have negative distraction from the status quo by actively polarizing men. That was the difference that they needed to engage to. Even if initial opt-in happens, conceding to their assertion, we told you that the feminist movement needs to stay consistent with that agenda, right? And here's the link. If you are going to promote solidarity, in every single instance that one woman has some issue, you actively have to go out and support that woman. Therefore, there's a higher barrier to you actually showcasing that solidarity. That is done with the feminist movement when they actively are not able to show solidarity, that are seen as ineffective for women, and they're seen as polarizing by men. Therefore, solidarity never happens. They never actually engage to why our reasons as to why people will opt in under our side so we get issue exists. This is an important clash because, as we told you in second, there are resource constraints, right? Even if achieving gender equality is the most important, probability of success then becomes the delta. Because women right now on the ground are struggling, therefore it's likely that having this policy change fast as possible is the most important. Second clash then, even if both agendas are equally achieved, which outcome is better? When individual empowerment happens, we told you three things happen. One, there's individual support for your interest. If they say that they need people supporting you who are similar, the more similar you are, the more likely you feel proximate to them. Therefore, if you're in your individual feminist movement, it's likely that you can access that impact. But on our side, it was unclear what their co-option actually was. The second, we told you that we come analytically prior to that, prior to that claim, right? Because insofar as you want to be successful and you actually want to vote for policies, you need female politicians in the first place. We said that even if men are CEOs, the reason why men want to stay CEOs is because they want to continue getting that profit. Therefore, when they select people, they actually need to select people who are skilled to work under them, and therefore they're going to pick the people who are actually trained. People are going to get trained on our side of the house. Thirdly, role models will exist. This is independent of whether men exist or not. Because they say role models can be your aunt and your mom, but if that role model is so proximate to you, what is the chance of you actually imitating them and becoming more successful? They say collective bargaining is going to happen on their side, and that was literally the mechanism for all of their impacts, but they never actually mechanized as to why collective bargaining was actually going to happen on their side, right? We continuously ask for this from us, but we never bother to engage, and therefore we can assume that collective bargaining is out of this debate. Panel, because debate actually requires mechanisms, I beg you to propose.